Hey friends, welcome to the 90.7 pod. I am your host, Isyss Garcia, and this is the Jazz Corner, where we talk about all things jazz for the music lovers and creators. So for all the haters, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Okay, now let's get into the music. All right, people. We got a lot to get into today, so let's just get into it, all right? Last episode, we explored some of the influential producers in jazz, such as Flying Lotus, Madlib, Herbie Hancock, you name it. We explored the behind-the-scenes visionaries of those who crafted sounds, brought musicians together, and helped shape the genre that we know and love today. And we talked about how their creativity and technical skills set the foundation for so many of the classics that we love today. And if you remember last episode, I briefly talked about how producers are often overlooked when it comes to music, despite the fact that they play an integral part in the music creation process. But when it comes to the industry, they're often not credited correctly or compensated correctly, despite being an essential factor to the music itself, which is why today we're shifting our spotlight towards another essential force in jazz that is sometimes not recognized as much as it should be, which is the women in jazz. From powerhouse vocalists and instrumentalists to innovators bringing jazz into new territory, women have been a keystone in shaping jazz at every stage. We'll celebrate the incredible legacy of past legends and shine a light on the modern day trailblazers carrying jazz into the future. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the story of women in jazz, past, present, and future. But first, let's hear about our song of the day. All right, before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to give y'all the song of the day, where I highlight my favorite jazz influenced song, and you have no choice but to listen to it. Let me know your thoughts on the song in the comments below, and if you want to tell me your song of the day, let us know in the comments, and you can force the entire triangle area to listen to your song. Now, without further ado, the song of the day is Smooth Operator by Sade, released in 1984, a part of the LP Diamond Life. And I just love this song so much, so I just felt like it was appropriate to use it today, considering we are talking about women in that sort of jazz sphere. And even though I wouldn't necessarily call her a jazz artist, they definitely do incorporate a lot of jazz sounds and elements into their music. Especially in this song, it's very prominent. You can definitely hear that jazz influence. And I love Sade, and I love their sound because they kind of have this sort of like smooth, jazzy, soulful, sort of almost like bossa nova type of sound going on. And yeah, I just think it's iconic. I love it. I'm sure you guys love this song too. But let me know what you guys think about the song of the day. Do you guys like it? Is there a different song of the day that you would have put? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I'm open to suggestions, you know? But with that being said, before we get into the nitty gritty of women in jazz, we're going to transition over to one of my favorite segments, which I like to call Guess That Sample. Welcome to Guess That Sample, where we take some of our favorite songs from the 21st century and have you all guess which artist/song the sample derives from. Let us know your answers in the comments, and bonus points if you can guess when the original song was released. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out who the sampled artist is, and if you want to pick the next song for Guess That Sample, you can put it in the comments below or let us know on our Instagram at WNCU_FM. All right, you guys, the way that we're going to do today's Guess That Sample is I'm going to show you guys the original song first and have y'all try to guess what is the song that samples it. It's a very notable song. I think most of y'all should be able to get it, and I think if you have any sort of knowledge on early hip hop in like the 80s and 90s, then y'all might be able to get it. I don't know. We'll see. But today's sampled song is Daylight by Ramp, a part of their LP Come Into Knowledge, released in 1977. And I chose this particular group and this song to use for my Guess That Sample because, one, I really like this song and I really like the song that samples it, and also Ramp is comprised of a lot of female musicians. For example, the lead vocalist on this song is the talented Sharon Matthews, whose soulful jazz-infused vocals add an unmistakable depth to their music, and this song really bridges jazz, soul, and hip hop very seamlessly and beautifully. So that's why I thought it would be perfect today to use for Guess That Sample. And of course, you know, I gotta give you guys at least a small hint. So I'm not gonna give too much away, but I will say the sampled song is from a notable hip hop group, and that group's name has 3 words in it. And that's as much as I'm gonna give you guys. Hopefully that hint should have helped you guys a lot, but let me know who you guys think it is in the comments, and stay to the end of the episode to figure out what the sampled song is. And now we are going to get into our main topic today, which is women in jazz. All right, you guys, you know what time it is. Let's get into the main segment today, shall we? Today, we're shining a spotlight on the incredible contributions of women in jazz, past, present, and future. We're diving into how women have shaped this genre, where we're seeing new growth, and what the future looks like for women in jazz. So, let's kick things off with a little history lesson. Let's go back to the early days of jazz, okay, all the way back, where women like Mary Lou Williams, Billie Holiday, and Ella Fitzgerald were not only household names, but also cultural icons. Mary Lou Williams, for instance, was a phenomenal pianist and arranger who mentored many of the greats that you guys may know. Despite operating in a male-dominated world, she had an impact on everyone from Duke Ellington to Dizzy Gillespie, crafting jazz sounds that were bold, experimental, and unmistakably hers. Then there's Billie Holiday, Lady Day herself, who brought an emotional depth to jazz that was, and still is, revolutionary. She wasn't just singing notes, okay? She was telling stories that people felt deep in their souls. And, of course, let's not forget Miss Ella Fitzgerald, the first lady of song, whose voice remains one of the most iconic in all of music. Each of these women added layers to jazz that still influences the genre today. And the women that I just named were probably some of the more recognizable names that you may hear, but to truly appreciate the impact of women in jazz, let's really go back and celebrate some of the incredible artists, musicians, and composers who weren't just participants, but were true innovators of jazz and pushing the boundaries of sound and style forward to what we know as jazz today. So, one of the earliest and most influential figures is Lil Hardin Armstrong, a pianist, composer, and the second wife of Louis Armstrong. Lil helped shape Louis Armstrong's career and pushed him to pursue a solo path. She was one of the first women to lead her own band in the 1920s and composed timeless songs like Struttin' with Some Barbecue. Her contributions helped define the early jazz sound. And think about it, if it wasn't for Lil Hart Armstrong, then we might not have seen Louis Armstrong's career take off in the way that it had, since Lil was the one that convinced him to take that path as a soloist. And I also wanted to go back to Mary Lou Williams and provide a little bit more context about her contributions, because I feel like a lot of people don't know that she has a lot of notable contributions to creating the sound of swing, bebop, and avant-garde jazz. She was known as the Little Piano Girl from East Liberty and was revered for her ability to adapt to and influence every era she lived through. She mentored many jazz giants, including Thelonious Monk and Dizzy Gillespie, and her groundbreaking compositions fused swing with bebop elements, which helped evolve jazz as we know it. Moving on to another powerhouse, we have the one and only Bessie Smith, known as the Empress of Blues. Her emotionally charged performances and unique vocal style, fused with blues and jazz, bridged genres and inspired countless artists in both genres. Bessie's work contributed to a form of jazz that could tell raw and powerful stories, a legacy that is carried on by jazz vocalists even today. Our next woman in jazz, we have Miss Dorothy Ashby, who is a groundbreaking jazz harpist whose skill and creativity redefined what the harp could do in terms of jazz. And during the 1950s and 60s, she infused bebop with African influences in her music and paved the way for jazz to expand beyond traditional instruments and sounds. Her 1968 album, Afro Harping, was revolutionary to say the least, blending jazz with Afro-Cuban rhythms and setting the stage for fusion genres, which I've talked about in previous episodes. Next, we have Miss Alice Coltrane, another remarkable figure who helped shape the sound of jazz in the 60s and 70s. Known for her work on piano and harp, Alice was a visionary who combined jazz with Eastern spirituality, Indian music, and avant-garde improvisation. Her work reflects her unique ability to merge jazz with cosmic and meditative sounds, paving the way for spiritual jazz. And for those who may not have heard of Alice Coltrane, she is in fact the wife of the one and only John Coltrane. So I think it's also worth mentioning how a lot of notable male jazz musicians were being supported by their wives, and not only just supported by their wives, but heavily influenced by their wives and vice versa. So I think it's just important to note the contributions that both the men and women both made together in order to push the sound forward. Anyways, moving on, let's not forget Miss Melba Liston, a trombonist and arranger who worked with Dizzy Gillespie, Quincy Jones, and Randy Weston. Melba was one of the few women trombonists of her time, and her arrangements and compositions brought bold new ideas to jazz orchestration. Her work expanded jazz's potential and opened doors for future generations of female instrumentalists and arrangers, just like harpist Dorothy Ashby. These women and so many more weren't just musicians, okay? They were pioneers who pushed jazz into new directions and inspired generations of artists. They cultivated jazz subgenres, expanded its reach, and reminded us that innovation has always been at the heart of jazz, and that is not a right that is exclusively attributed to the males. Now, we have the foundation. We see who the female pioneers of jazz were. So now let's kind of fast forward a little bit and see who is upholding that tradition while also building upon that innovation in modern times. Looking at the present, we see women taking jazz in so many exciting directions. Take Esperanza Spalding, for example. She's brought jazz into contemporary culture by blending elements of R&B, funk, and classical music into her work. And her music not only showcases her virtuosity as a bassist and vocalist, but also redefines what jazz can be and the limitations around it. Then there's Cecile McLaurin Salvant, whose voice has a richness and versatility in it that transports listeners. Cecile draws on blues, folk, and early jazz, yet her style still feels very entirely fresh and original. And these artists are just a few examples that prove that jazz isn't just alive and well, but it's evolving, growing, and staying relevant with every new note that is played. And obviously, women are at the forefront of this evolution. With that being said, let's also see what the future looks like for women in jazz, shall we? There's a new generation of artists who are reimagining what jazz can be. More young women are stepping into the jazz world with a passion to both honor its traditions and break its boundaries. There's hope for even more diversity and inclusion as artists experiment with mixing genres and drawing from global sounds. Women are also leading more bands, creating their own record labels, and building spaces for other female musicians to thrive. So that's also going to heavily contribute to the innovation of jazz as a whole. But it's not just about the music, it's also about the community. Women are shaping jazz education, working as mentors, and fostering inclusive spaces where young artists can explore their sound and creativity without limitation. They're pushing for an industry where jazz is open and accessible to everyone. And that's not to say that the male musicians aren't doing that, but like I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, a lot of women are often overlooked for their contributions simply because of the fact that they are women, which is why I think it's important for me to highlight the specific contributions of women in jazz and show just how much they are actually contributing to the genre, because I think as far as a lot of people know, it's the men that are running it. I'm sure most people can name famous jazz musicians off the top of their head, and most of them are going to be male. So yeah, it's just important to highlight what these women have done, what they're doing, and what they plan on doing in the future in the name of jazz. But that is going to wrap up our main segment today about women in jazz, and it's inspiring to think about where this genre is headed. Jazz has always been about self-expression, storytelling, and breaking down barriers, and the future is looking very bright for female voices in jazz. And who knows? The next Billie, Ella, or Esperanza could be listening to us right now, ready to change the world with her own sound. But before we wrap up this segment, I want to encourage everyone listening to explore the music of these amazing women, dig into the history, enjoy the present, and keep an ear out for those emerging artists who will shape the future of jazz. Thank you for listening to this segment of Women in Jazz, and let's get into the segment that you guys have been waiting for, which is the Guess That Sample Artist Reveal. All right, you guys, you've been waiting patiently, and it is finally time for the Guess That Sample artist reveal. So, if y'all remember from earlier in this episode, I played you guys a song from Ramp called Daylight, released in 1977, and I hope you guys put your submissions in the comments below for who you guys think sampled that song and what the name of the sampled song is, because we are about to reveal it now. So, the group that sampled Ramp's song Daylight is none other than the one, the only Tribe Called Quest in their song Bonita Applebum, released in 1990, a part of their album People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm. It is a hip-hop track that has created its own sort of culture around it. It's a very iconic hip-hop song that a lot of people adore. Me personally, I love this song, and I love Tribe Called Quest, and I love that they incorporate a lot of jazz samples in their song, because it really did define a very large period of hip-hop, specifically jazz rap, around that time. And I chose this song today not only just because it's a great song that has a great sample in it, but also because it really shows how female influences like that of Sharon Matthews are being repurposed and modernized into a entirely different genre, but it still upholds the elements of jazz from the past and innovates them into something new and reimagined, which is the purpose of today's episode. So if you guys got it right, let me know in the comments below, and if you got it wrong, hey, that's okay. There will be more Guess That samples, and who knows, you might be able to get it on the next try. That's going to wrap up today's segment of Guess That Sample. And now we are going to wrap this episode up by telling you guys an important event that's happening in Durham, and then we'll take it on over to the outro. Alright, y'all, before we wrap up this podcast today, I just wanted to highlight one specific event that I think you guys should know about, taking place next month, and it's perfect for friends and family, and it's also free, so I think you guys are going to like it. It is the Durham Art Walk Holiday Market. It is a festive fine arts and crafts event that kicks off the holiday season in downtown Durham. We invite art lovers to experience a weekend featuring local artists, live music, world-class restaurants, and great shopping at venues in the Durham City Center. Like I mentioned, it's free and very family friendly, and if you enjoy fine arts, crafts, live music, and good shopping opportunities, I mean, come on people, Christmas is right around the corner, so y'all can get something nice for a family member or loved one. I recommend you guys pop out. I will definitely be there, so I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys there as well. But don't even think about going to this event yet if you haven't voted, okay, people? Look, this is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. So, doesn't matter who you guys are voting for, just as long as you're getting out and voting, whether that's in person or via mail or what have you. And remember, early voting ends this weekend on November 2nd, which is Saturday, and the general election is on November 5th. So make sure, before you guys think about going to the Durham Art Walk Holiday Market, please make sure you guys get out there and vote. And that is going to conclude my announcements for the day. Let's take it on over to the outro. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this week's episode of the 90.7 Pods, The Jazz Corner. The pod where you don't have to like jazz to enjoy it, but that makes it all the more better. Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments below and let us know what you want to see from us at The Jazz Corner. I'm your host, Isyss Garcia, and we will catch you in the next one.
To question a authority.